Alrighty. Hello. Let me know if you can hear me. I want to make sure that all of my mic and my camera and all that stuff is working. I am still experimenting with my setup and buying and acquiring new equipment, so I'm hoping that everything is working well. Just let me know in the chat. Hi Max, glad you could be here. Hi Megan, you'll be popping in and out. Well, I'll be glad that you can listen in when you can. And I said so in the chat by hi Henry and Noah and Tyson. I'm glad you guys are here. Thanks for coming to hang out with me for this afternoon. I'm excited. Just let me know. I'm waiting for the lag. Yay, I can be heard. Thank you, Noah. Yay. Thanks for letting me know, guys. Okay, you guys are going to have to bear with me. I'm still getting over that cold. Like, I'm fine, but I'm still coughing occasionally, so I'm hoping that I can keep that to a minimum because I know it's really annoying to hear on the mic. Oh, thank you, Megan. Hi, Mercer. Yay, good. You guys can hear me. Well, I'm just going to hang out for a couple minutes while I wait for people to find me if there's anyone else who's going to be joining us today. How are you guys doing? What projects are you working on? Today we're going to be talking about writer's block, so I guess, do you guys feel like you experience writer's block a lot? Is this something that you are still trying to figure out? Or is this something that you feel like you've kind of overcome? I'm curious to know kind of where everybody's at. I feel like I struggled with writer's block for, I want to say years. Before I started screenwriting, I've always wanted to be a writer. And originally it was like novels, fantasy novels, and like stage play sort of stuff. But I never actually wrote anything, and I would sit down to write. I liked the idea of writing, but I didn't ever actually write very much. I don't feel like I really got over it until probably maybe 4 years ago, 5 years ago, when I really started writing a lot of screenplays, short films. And like, it's hard to say that you overcame it because that kind of to me means like you never experience it again. And I would say that that's true now. I don't ever get writer's block now. But 4 or 5 years ago, I would say that I only experienced it every so often. 5 years before that, I would say I didn't write hardly at all because all I could do was stare at the blank page and not actually write anything. Ebbs and flows for you, Henry. I think I don't get writer's block, I get writer's lack of motivation. Hey, we're going to talk a little bit about that today. I know what you mean. I know what you mean. Tyson says, I'm good when you're writing the script, but until you come up with an idea of the story, you have writer's block. That's interesting. So most people that I know write because they have ideas, but you're writing because you want to write and you don't necessarily have the ideas, or you're writing for a client or a job that you need to. Mercer says, you do mostly documentary right now. You don't write much for them, but it would be good to write more. Writing is good. I think writing is good for even for people who aren't like writers. It helps you think. All right, I'm just going to give it a couple more minutes and for other people to find me before I dive in. Till you come up with an idea. Yeah, been there. Yeah, at the beginning of projects where it's just like, well, I want to make something, but what? Where do I go? Some purpose and direction would be great. Thanks. Noah, you often get stuck with the midsection of the script. You usually know the whole beginning and ending in your head. Yeah, been there too. Cool. Well, we got a lot of variety here on where we experience it. Megan says you get writer's block and lack of motivation all over the process. Man, I'm gonna try not to cough, you guys. I know it's annoying. It annoys me. I guess I should also check. Is the mic too loud or too quiet? Let me know. It's very difficult. I haven't figured out how to check the levels before I go live. I don't understand how this works yet. So hopefully, maybe I should turn my down. I'm getting some red in my levels. Bright Sword. Hey, is that John? Mechanical block for you. I know what it takes to put those words on screen, so that leads to a certain self-censoring or paralysis. Ooh, producer's writer's block. We can't do that. We can't do that. We can't do this. We can't do that. Yep. Been there as well. Alrighty. Well, let's kind of get started here. Thank you guys for being with me. Yep. Hi, John. I'm glad you could be here. It's been a hot minute. Alrighty. Where to start? I do have talking points, I promise. But normally, for my videos, I am very scripted. Duh, I'm a writer. I like having written what I'm going to say out. So you guys are going to have to bear with me a little bit as I get into the flow here. I'm not used to making all of my points succinctly right out of the gate. I can say the same thing over like 4 times before I actually like settle in on what I wanted to say. So we might have to endure some rambling from me today. To kind of set the stage on what we're doing today, I'm gonna try and cover a lot of different areas of writing and talk about writer's block in each one of them. So what I'm hoping you guys will do is, if something isn't clicking with you, you're like, I don't really need to hear this, that's fine. I don't think you need to take everything away and try and implement everything. What I'd really like you guys to do is listen for that 1 or 2 things that I'm hoping will kind of jog a thought for you, grab your interest on, oh, that's something that I could research into a little bit more. Things like that. I'm just going to cover kind of broadly a lot of things. So if you guys could just kind of be watching out and paying attention to your own reactions to, as I talk through things, to find those like 1 or 2 little things that are going to click with you and make a difference in your process. That's how I found that it works. You don't usually get like a whole download and understand everything. It's little pieces here and there that you add as you gain understanding and as you can apply it to where you are right now. Tyson said, do you think AI is a good tool to help with writer's block? I do. I'm very interested in AI. I need to do a little bit of experimenting and research on it. I think AI is probably going to be more helpful the more you understand how to interact with it. So I've had very, very basic interactions with like ChatGPT. Did I say that right? I always get acronyms wrong. And so I think I just haven't understood enough how to interact with it, how to ask the right questions to prompt the right things. But I've been seeing some stuff that's very exciting with AI. I think that writers are currently and artists in general are very wary of AI, and I think to some extent that's, that's founded. But I also just don't think that it can replace creativity. And so, unfortunately, what it is going to replace is formulaic writing, formulaic art, stuff that's really just not super creative. And unfortunately, what that means is it's the beginning artists. It's artists that haven't become masters yet, such as myself, that are maybe going to feel that a bit. It's, because you're going to be competing with AI. I don't think it can compete with actual creative masters, though, at all. And so I'm not too scared of it. At least in its current form. We'll see where it's going. But I think it can definitely help with writer's block because it can kind of sum up a lot of things, write them out, get them out on the page for you to edit. And if that's the way that you work, where you need a draft and then you edit it to kind of get into the writing process, then that can be really helpful. Megan says, your friend suggested for you to use ChatGPT to help with plotting and writer's block, but didn't help me with dialogue and prose. That's just me. Yeah, it's drawing from everything else. And so it's not going to be terribly original, but that's okay. We're not terribly original either. And so I think what it will end up doing is just kind of moving through the process of getting to original thought quicker. We'll see. We'll see how it plays out. A whole new world is ahead of us. For sure. I don't think it's going anywhere. Going away anytime soon, I should say. All right. Writer's block. I just want to start with a prayer, I guess. Lord, I just want to pray over this time together. I pray for these young creatives and artists, Lord, that you would be with them in their process, that you would bring to the forefront the things that they should be focusing on right now, the things that they need to hear right now. Lord, I pray you would just, inspire them, show them that when they walk with you, the process is easier and they don't have to feel lost, Lord. So we pray you just have your hand on this discussion today and be with everyone as we are learning together. Alrighty. What is writer's block? Why does this happen? It's very annoying. You're excited to write. You want to write. You sit down and there's just nothing there. Your brain just cannot seem to focus down on one train of thought long enough to actually get it out on paper and follow the idea all the way to where it might be leading. You're kind of just spinning. For me, writer's block is spinning in too many thoughts. There's too many different directions that I could go, and I have no way to prioritize them or bring order to them. So in answering what is writer's block, and I don't want you to think that, how would I say that? I think the same thing is still happening even if you sit down and you're like, my mind is blank. I think the same thing is still happening. The problem is your brain cannot prioritize everything that it's working through enough to present you with anything solid. And so it feels like you're blank. So thanks, Megan. I'm glad that, we can encourage each other and be with each other in being Christian writers. So what is writer's block? I think you have to kind of go backwards a little bit and say, well, what is writing? What is your brain actually working on and doing when you are writing? And in the broadest paint strokes that I can, what I think it is you are bringing order to a lot of disconnected thoughts. That's what creativity is. You're connecting things that other people aren't connecting. That's how you be original and be creative. You're seeing things and connecting things that normally wouldn't be connected, or other people just don't have the leaning toward to connect. Anyway, bringing order to all of that is the process of writing. You have multiple threads, multiple characters, multiple story thoughts and avenues, and you're trying to bring it all in alignment so that it lines up to tell one story and it all supports each other on one thread, right? That's complicated. It's a lot of things to balance. And so what writer's block is when there's not yet enough order to everything that you're seeing or everything that you're perceiving, everything your background subconsciously working on. it's not yet conscious enough for you to bring order to it. And so conquering writer's block is all about bringing things forward to be conscious and bringing it to order. Let me know if you have questions along the way. Feel free to be in the chat, to post them in the chat. I can stop at any time and answer questions. I'm happy to do that. So I want to look at that idea of bringing order to disconnected or random or chaotic thoughts, however you want to think about it. I want to look at that in kind of 3 different areas. And if you saw the head banner that was at the kind of the beginning before I came on here, the 3 areas were on that. It's your craft, your process, and your message. And so I want to look at each of those. Let's start with your craft, which is the craft of storytelling and being creative in storytelling. So kind of first things here, this is how I understand creativity to work. And this applies to pretty much every area of art or creativity. In my opinion, this is how our brains kind of work. How my brain works at least. So applied to writing, what this would be is that the create bullet point, that just means write. That means draft is where you're at. So for me, how writing goes is you have a spark. It's that first kind of like tingle, that question, like, that would be interesting. I wonder if, that kind of like, I want to see something like this. It's that little tiny spark. And I actually have done a whole video on on this spark, on where you find sparks and how to develop them a little bit more so that you can bring them to that kind of conscious area where you can work on it. Sparks are from subconscious connecting of random ideas, seemingly random ideas. You're subconsciously like, oh, that's a thing, kind of connect them, and into your brain pops an idea, right? So the next stage is the development stage, because you're trying to go from a spark to a story. The spark can be a character, it could be a theme, it could be a question that you have, it could be a piece of music, like it could literally be anything that kind of gets your brain firing. And so the development process is about rounding that out, bringing it to a full picture, a full story. It's about asking the questions that are going to get you your characters, your character arcs, your structure, your plot, all of the bits and pieces that you need to actually get to the drafting process, which is, like I said, it's that create section. So where I find writer's block happens for most people, and definitely where it was happening for me, was between development and drafting. And sorry guys. For me, it was because I was not doing enough development. There's that idea again. I was not bringing enough order to all of my disconnected thoughts in order to actually put the words down on paper. So the words that I found for this through my research was that I'm a heavy plotter. I like a lot of outlines. I like very detailed outlines. And so I had to lean into who I actually am as a writer and fully embrace the development time and part of the process of story crafting. I couldn't just skip over it, even though I really wanted to just sit down and be able to write. Now, not everybody is a heavy plotter, and I definitely think there are people who plot way more than I do. I'm kind of somewhere on the far end of that spectrum, but not all the way. You fall everywhere on that spectrum. And so I think this is going to be another theme as we talk through this. You have to come to know yourself. You have to experiment and figure out, who are you as a writer? How does crafting a story look for you when we're talking about your craft here? What are the first things that come to mind? Is it structure? Is it characters? Is it I can get a little bit more into what development is, but what there is uniqueness inside of each of us, and I think our culture does not teach us to lean into it at all. And so as artists and as creatives, it's all about like trying to juggle that oh, I feel this inner voice inside me, but our culture does not teach you to listen to that at all. So it's about becoming way more aware of what's coming up from inside you. What sounds interesting to you? What do you need right now? What is your unique way of crafting a story? Because everyone's going to come at it slightly differently. I think that's probably one of the things that's going to give most people writer's block, is they're not doing enough development. They don't understand what they need in development. And so they try to just jump straight ahead into creating. And like, I think it was Noah, you said that you tend to get lost in the middle of this, in the midsection of the script. There it is. That's a development issue. You haven't worked out all the questions and problems and brought enough order to what you're trying to do to understand the full picture, right? Megan, you said, so true. It's quite frustrating how long it sometimes takes for you to figure out what your process is. You're still learning and changing your process. Hey, me too. Yeah. How do you know when you found your process? Well, I don't think that there's just one version of your process. I think you grow and you change. You get interested in different things. There's different things you want to try. What I want you guys to take away from this is more just the idea that there is this unique... Everyone has a unique way of coming at story and coming at the craft of story. And so part of being a writer is embracing that and constantly experimenting with it, being creative with it, finding what works for you, finding what doesn't work for you, all that sort of thing. Let's see. I can't, and maybe you have to tell me, guys, if this is ringing true with you at all. In nothing that I've done have I ever not been able to trace writer's block back to development. I was not developed enough. I didn't figure out my characters well enough. I didn't figure out my character tactics well enough. I jumped ahead to creating. Hi, Johnston. Glad you could be here. Because that's what we're taught that writing is, right? That's where you sit down and you put words on a page. And we're not taught to value all the other pieces of writing as, as valuable expenditures of your time and brain space. It's like, just get to the writing part. Just get to the writing part, because that's where other people start seeing value. In perfect, that's, editing, line editing, story editing, all of that. I don't think you really experience writer's block there. And reflect. Actually, I wanted to talk about this a little bit hearing from you, Tyson, because I think that... Man, I'm sorry I'm coughing so much, guys. The reflect part of this process is that kind of subconscious work that I talked about that leads to a spark, right? You're giving your brain some space to just kind of work, and you're reflecting on, for me, reflecting means you look back on what you have done, on what was fun for you, what inspired you, where you feel like you need to work. There's so many different ways you can look at it and be like, I wonder what would happen if I tried a story but do it this way, because I didn't do it that way last time and it didn't work out, or it's that period where you're letting your brain just kind of think a lot about ideas. During the reflect time in the process, I end up reading a lot. I'm reading books about writing. I'm just reading books of things that I'm interested in. like history or psychology or the things that I'm interested in right now. And so I'll just read about that stuff. And lo and behold, I'm like filling up my little creativity cup with ingredients that my brain can start kind of going, And so when I get to that spark phase again, I'm like, I need an idea, guys. Fire away. Give me something. I'm not coming from a place of nothing. I'm coming from a full cup of, this is what I have done. This is what I would like to do. These are some things that I'm interested in. These are my goals. And all of those can work together, and your brain can use them to be creating sparks for your stories. Sorry, feeling something fall on my head. Gosh, that's alarming. All right, I wanted to talk about development just a little bit. Best thing for you to do is just walk away. Yeah. Walk away, let your brain work on it. But I do think that you can confuse that with development. Or I have in the past, where I think there's a lot of downtime in development where you're just processing things and you're giving your brain space to come up with ideas. But it has to be purposeful space. It can't just be, oh, now I'm going to play video games, or I'm going to, go hang out with my friends, because then your brain's cluttered with what's happening. It's actually looking for stillness, giving yourself some space. People journal, people work out, people, anything that's not mentally going to crowd your brain. And development also needs that. I would say development is even more purposeful, because you can be development is about bringing order to your thoughts, and reflecting is about opening yourself up to new ideas and new thoughts, instead of trying to bring order to, that's not part of this story, that's not part of this story, that could be that, oh, that connects to that thing, and that's, oh yeah, that's a really good fit, and that's not part of this story. That's development. It's about bringing order. Reflecting is not that process. Okay. In talking about bringing order to your thoughts and your creativity, this is how development works for me. And I can't really lay it out any other way than how it works for me. And so I'm really not trying to say this is the way that you should do it. Like I said, everyone has a unique way of coming at this. But I'm just giving you a little bit of a demonstration of how this works for me. And I hope it'll spark some thoughts and some questions for you to kind of go, well, how does that work for me? So in development, I work through these things in this order when bringing all the pieces of my story together. So I start with theme, which is, what am I trying to say? What question or issue am I grappling with? What are the different aspects of that issue? You see how, putting some order to your craft and figuring out how it works for you automatically gives some order to your questions, which will automatically bring order to your thoughts. And you're able to kind of your brain can start prioritizing what it needs to work on first to bring order. So for me, it's theme. I'll talk about it with my family and my friends. It'll be a question. I'll read about it. I'll be journaling about it, talking about it. Like I said, I put value on that time that I spend doing those things, so that I'm not feeling like, oh, I'm not writing, I'm not getting anything done. I put value on that time to do those things. Out of the theme, I get a character web, which is how the different characters in my story stand for different angles on my theme. So this would be like four-corner opposition is John Truby's way of doing this. I've seen a few other ways of character webbing, but it's not my protagonist's character arc that's a little piece of it. It's the conflicts between the characters and what the web and the world of the characters will be. Out of that, I start asking questions about structure. Okay, what's the end point? Which is coming out of my theme, right? And it's coming out of my character webs, how these characters are going to push and pull each other toward the end. What is the end point? What is the beginning point? What's the midpoint? Here I start seeing how the theme is going to play out structurally, how the characters are going to play out structurally, what the big scenes will be, which might inspire some research on what is the location they're going to look like, what kind of... It's hard to describe, right? Because it's all subjective to the story that you're telling. But the structure starts forming for everything. After the structure, which is the big picture pieces in place, you get even more ordered and even more specific on the genre. What are the tropes of the genre? What are the plot beats of this particular genre that I need to hit to satisfy my audience? And that leads you to filling in the gaps. What are the plot beats? How is each one flowing into the next one? And it's going to get me all the way to the end, right? Order, bringing more order, fleshing it out, becoming more and more specific. And then it's after that I flesh out the characters. And for me, fleshing out the characters is like character tactics, character motivations. Why do they get angry? What things make them angry? What things make them sad? If they're in this situation, how would they react? It's very, very, very specific questions about your character. And you can see all sorts of things. There's all sorts of like tools and forms that go along with this development process. This is the crafting process of your story. It's all about, there's lots of different ways you can look at this. And so some people like filling out character questionnaires. Some people like five arc structure. Some people don't like to heavily rely on their theme so much. This needs to be customized to you. What makes sense for you? How do you think? How do you work through these things? And so it's just an area to put aside writing for a time. If you feel like this is where you're really, really struggling, put aside writing for a time and focus on this. What would help me here? What sounds interesting here? What draws my attention? What do I want to try? Put some emphasis on your process for a little while instead of on your product. Because if you are only focused on the product, what is going to happen is you will burn out. That's what will happen. But if you make the process something that you're working on, something that you love, something that you can find fulfillment in, you're never going to burn out. It's always going to be fun. It's always going to be new. And you run into that lack of motivation a lot less when you understand what your process is, right? All right, this is development. We're talking about, so we have spark, development, create. Now I want to talk a little bit about the drafting process, that creative, when you're actually getting things down on paper, getting your story down on paper, you're creating your product for the first time before you refine it. For me, this is what I would call your process. We're kind of moving into a different area. We're talking about the craft, and now we're going to talk about the process. Your process for writing, for doing of the writing, right? There's kind of 4 elements to this, and the first one is motivation. How do you get motivated? Because this is just as unique to you as everything else is, right? How do you stay motivated? Do you know how motivation works? This is an area of research. If you feel like, maybe this is the area where I'm kind of stuck, motivation, I just kind of put some thoughts in here on what questions I had to kind of work through and the conclusions I came to with motivation for myself. One of the big pieces is realistic vision. We tend to, well, we're writers, we have very active imaginations. And so we imagine what it's going to look like, right? We envision it. And very often the vision isn't actually in line with what reality looks like. I talk a little bit about, well, I would say even what we have been talking about falls under that, where when we don't place value on the development process, you don't envision it and you don't spend time thinking about, oh, when I get to development, I'll do la-di-da-di-da-di-da, right? You don't envision it, and so it just gets left out. And I think I've also, I think that movies portray writers badly, and I definitely had that in my head as the vision of writing, where the writer just stays up all night and he's pounding the keys and he's having so many ideas and he's talking with himself, and then boom, he lands the finished draft down on his editor's desk, right? That's not how it goes. That's not what it feels like. That's not what it looks like. That's not what it's going to look like. Or it's just not what it's going to be like. So we get very unmotivated and feel disappointed and like we're not living up to something when we get to writing and it's not actually how we thought it was. So having realistic vision is a huge part of motivation, of actually taking the time to think through what does a writing process look like? What does a life filled with writing look like? What does it feel like? What does each of the steps feel like? What does the spark feel like? What does that time in the process feel like? What does the development time in the process feel like? What does the create time, that drafting time in the process feel like? All right, the next one is specific and short-term goals, because I think we all want to be writing bigger things, longer things, novels, screenplays, that sort of thing. And it's so huge in our head, right? So part of motivation is laying out some very specific short-term goals that you can reach in just a week or two. I'm going to have 15 pages written in the next 2 weeks. I'm going to finish this scene. I am going to finish laying out my character web. Break it down into small goals, because when you scale it up and it's huge, you make a little bit of progress and it just looks like you just moved, you didn't barely even move, right? And so you lose motivation. You don't feel like you're going anywhere. A reward system. Reward yourself for the small things. Reward yourself for every time you overcome a hard thing, And what is hard for you is specific to you. It'll be different for everybody. And also your rewards, what is rewarding to you, will be different for everybody. For me, it's fun drinks. When I am out of practice of writing, what gets my butt in the seat? Is making myself a fun drink and saying I'm going to sit down, and when I finish, 5 sentences, I get to take a sip of my fun drink. It's like, know what's going to motivate you in your reward system. For some people, it's not something tangible like buying something or eating something. It's more the feeling that you get, and that is more tied to having specific and short-term goals. The feeling that you get when you accomplish a goal can be the reward system, if that's kind of the person that you are. But know what feels like a reward to you and tie that to your short-term goals. Don't wait for the big ones, because you're gonna run out of motivation. Yeah. You never thought of rewarding yourself to get writing done. Yeah, I find that I don't have to do it for very long. I only have to do it for a week or so, and after that, I'm excited to sit down and write. I'm motivated even without the reward being there. And as you get better at writing, or you're just exercising that muscle so it doesn't get so hard, your goals actually end up getting a little further apart, and your rewards get further and further apart as well, because you gain more stamina of being able to go longer without seeing tangible progress or receiving a reward that your brain goes, oh, I liked that, which was a concern for me when I was like, well, I can't just go buy a sugary drink every time I feel like I need to write. That's not going to be healthy for me. But I realized that, well, this is just kind of a little handicap, a little crutch to get me to actually sit down and do it. I think we've talked about before, Megan, with specific and short-term goals. It's like, just sit down for 15 minutes. Sit down for 15 minutes. That's all you have to do. If you don't come up with anything, it's fine. But you sat down for 15 minutes. So this process is about building trust with yourself. When you don't show up for your interests and your projects, and it's like not showing up for a commitment, and you end up like you don't trust yourself. You don't feel like you can do it. And so that, if it's repeated over and over and over throughout the years, that you say you're going to do something, you're going to show up, you're going to sit down and write, you're actually going to accomplish your goals, and then you never follow through, you lose a lot of trust with yourself, and you start believing that you can't do it, right? So know that this process overall is about building trust with yourself, and that is tiny baby steps at first, and then bigger steps, and then bigger steps, and then bigger steps. You have to accept that it's a process. It's just not going to happen overnight. And maybe that's the reconceptualize the experience. Decide to embrace the process, right? And with reconceptualizing the experience, it's also, if you find yourself just dreading sitting down to write and I don't want to, it's such a drag, it's work, I don't want it, decide not to think that way anymore. Say, no, I actually feel good when I get some writing done. I actually feel good when I accomplish my goals. And reconceptualize the idea of sitting down to be a positive thing. Getting the work done is a positive thing, and that's aligned with the vision piece. Envision what that's going to feel like. Know what's going to motivate you. That's the main point here, right? Okay, moving on. So we are talking about your writing process, and there's 4 pieces to it that I'm going to cover. Motivation is the first one. The second one is your schedule. For a lot of people with writer's block, it's all about, well, I don't have time. I was going to, but I ran out of time. And I know that you guys probably all know this, but I wanted to cover it because I wanted to look at it through the lens of, you're very unique. You're uniquely made. What you need and what is going to support you in your process is completely different than it is for other people. You need to take a look at this and ask yourself some questions of like, is this actually the way that it is? I've seen a lot of young writers like, oh, how does Stephen King do it? Oh, how does blah, 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 whoever amazing writer do it? And they try and do it like they do it. And I think that can be valuable if you're looking for ideas on different ways that you can order your life. But I don't think that your writing schedule or your writing process, rather, I don't think that Stephen King's writing process is going to be the key to unlock your creativity, right? Maybe pieces of it will, but you need to look at this as what is going to support you and what are your needs. So with scheduling, you need to figure out how to be consistent, how that is actually going to play out in your real life with your other commitments. Where are the hours for you to sit down? So with block scheduling, if you haven't heard about block scheduling, there's something to look up. It's about making different blocks in your day and arranging different activities in that block. So you're not committing yourself to at 2 o'clock, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to do this. Because often that can lead to failure and feeling like you're a failure if you can't sit down right at 2 o'clock. But block scheduling is about understanding all of the pieces of your life and being able to arrange them in a way that will suit you. So that's an area to research if you're interested. Your productive time. Okay, when are you the most creative? When are you the most productive? Is it evening? Is it the afternoon? Is it the morning? When will actually work? When will your brain actually be its most alive? And built into that is also how long of a session do you think is a good session for you? And this is part of building stamina. It might be that 15 minutes, but ideally, what would be a good session for you? For me, it's like 3 hours. I burn out after about 3 hours. And I think that as you are able to write more and more and more, that stamina will build, and maybe mine will change. That's where I'm at right now. I rarely get to actually write for 3 hours, but I know that's where a happy place is for me, that I can take kind of the first half hour to really get into it, and then the last half hour is kind of drained and dead, and so there's like a good solid 2 hours in there where I can get good content done. Yeah, so these are just some questions to ask yourself. Are you ordering, and there's the word again, ordering your life to actually support your dream of being a writer? And there's things that you can't move around, obviously. If you have a job, if you have other commitments, your time is not your own, and I totally get that. But can you be creative within that? What is the time that you have outside that? And can you prioritize writing or it's just find what will actually support you and not try and go by any arbitrary rules. Think about what you need. Learn from other writers. Right, this is what I said. It can be fine and great to look at the routines of other writers to get ideas and just be like, that's an interesting thought. Never thought of that before. Maybe I'll try that. This whole process is going to be kind of a trial and error. And that's why I say I think you need to decide to put the product aside for a while and focus on your process. If you're experiencing writer's block, it's because your process is not yet figured out enough that it's actually supporting you all the way that it needs to. And so setting aside the product for a little bit of time to experiment and play in your process and really come to love your process can be very, very valuable. And so feel free to put value on doing that, because it will, if you want to be a writer for the rest of your life, you need it to be well supported, right? So learn from other writers. I looked at YouTube. There's tons of stuff on YouTube about how different writers work. I found a couple cool channels of writers trying out famous writers' routines for like a couple weeks, and then they would vlog their experience. So you can actually see how it plays out and what it looks like in your real life, and not in your imaginings and in your well, that would be fun one day, sort of sort of corner of your brain, And the last one on here is seasons. Life has seasons, and I think it's when you embrace that, it makes this less of a struggle, and there's less chance of you feeling like a failure and getting unmotivated to know what season you're in. And so there's seasons where you need to prioritize writing, right? Maybe you don't go out with your friends so much. Maybe you don't watch any movies. I've definitely gone through seasons where I'm like, I want to watch movies, but I have no time because I'm prioritizing other things. But then there's other seasons where it's like, well, writing's a nice thing that I do because it's my creative outlet. And it's not a priority over other areas of my life right now. And know what season you're in, and embrace the freedom that gives you. I think it helps you to look far more long term at what you're doing, and again, bring order to the long-term vision of your life. And, maybe that's not super long-term. Maybe it's just the next couple of years or just this year. It's like, okay, I'm going to spend 3 months really, really focusing on writing. It's only 3 months. And that feels way more doable, and you can envision that, then I got to show up every day for the rest of my life at, 5 a.m. and do 3 hours of writing. a lot of writers think that way, and it just leads to burnout, and it leads to where you're struggling against reality and against yourself. And anyway, yeah, know what season you're in and be honest with yourself is kind of the theme of your schedule. Is it true that you don't have time? Or is it true that you're procrastinating? Is it true? Do you honestly know what you need? Do you honestly know what works? Do you honestly know what season you're in? And just kind of be honest with yourself about what your shortcomings are in showing up for yourself and for your writing. That's kind of all I had to say about that one. I might pause for a sec. Do you guys have any questions so far? There's seasons of sowing and reaping, and slow and busy are burnt out. Yeah. That's a good thought too, that you can also know when you're in a season of burnt out. And there's a difference between burnt out and in that season of reflection, or being burnt out and writer's block. They're not the same. Burnt out is where you chronically do not want to do this. There's no joy in showing up. There's no joy in writing it. Everything feels like a slog. Your writing's going to suffer. Your life's going to suffer, right? So definitely there's a season of being burnt out and just be going, okay, I need a little break. I'm not going to do this for a while because I want to retain my lifelong love of it, Definitely going to try writing more commercial scripts. Cool. That's what you're feeling kind of inspired about and drawn to? That's exciting. I want to empower you guys to really lean into who you are, We're all made very differently, and we need very different things. And, what's that quote? I was watching a Creative Live class about creative writing, and she kind of opened with that thought that when we're learning how to write, grammar, spelling, those kind of things, all the focus is put on the product and none of the focus is put on the process. And so as writers, we have to kind of unlearn that priority and know that when you put the work into the process, the product will be the better for it. It's not that you're not going to have good products anymore. It's when you put the work in the process, your product's going to turn out way better. There'll be more joy in it and more reality in it. All right. I'll go through this one really quick. When you're drafting, do you know what your distractions are? Everyone has different ones. Definitely some of the ones I've had are research, where you just, you had a question right in the middle there. And so you go off on a 2-hour research thing and you did not get drafting done. What are the strategies to avoid that from happening? And one of the first strategies is one of the strategies for me is to do the research before you get there. When you get really, really specific with your outline, with those 5 things that I showed you, your theme, your character web, your structure, your plot points, and your character arc, that's you can get a lot of your research done before you ever get there. But no, is research going to hijack you? And it's fine if it only happens once or twice, but if it's happening once a week, every time you try and write, well, that's definitely a sign you need to go back to development and figure out some things before you continue drafting. Because it's not that research is bad. What the problem is that it unmotivates you. It demotivates you. What's the word for that, guys? You lose your motivation, I guess is what you say, because you sit down and then you go, I didn't write anything today. Do you have an example of a time you got writer's block on one of your scripts or short films? Trying to think of a specific example. I mean, on the one I was just writing recently, it's a drama short film that takes place in one scene. It's these 3 characters around a dining room table and acting out revenge story that kind of involves all 3 of them. Anyway, I sat down to write and nothing. And now I know when that happens, it's like, stop trying to come up with ideas and stop and evaluate, why is that happening? What is the hold up here? And for me, it was that I hadn't figured out the character tactics. I didn't know how one of my characters was going to react. And so they were just kind of like a blank piece of paper that was there. It was like, well, they need to serve this function in the story, but I hadn't actually made them a person. And that would act and react in realistic ways with the other character. And so I was like, okay, stop scripting. I'm going to go develop this character. You can do character development sheets, questionnaires. There's all sorts of things to help you develop your character. It was like, I need to make this a person in my head so that I can actually, bring the story threads together and see how they react. That's definitely how I think about story. You're building all your pieces and then you throw them in the story and see how they react. Just really quickly, some things. Notifications. Turn them off when you're drafting, when you're writing. Give yourself that focused time. Again, be honest with yourself. Do you need to pay attention to that right now? And maybe that's true. There are some things that you do need to be notified about right now. But for most things, it can wait. And that will just really cut down your time. Interruptions, other people coming to talk to you, having to move space, having to plug in your laptop because it died. Minimize interruptions as well. Know what is chronically interrupting you and what interruptions you have a tendency to allow. That sort of thing. Again, this is about making it yours. Make it for you. And your mental load. Maybe this is just a mom thing because I have 2 little kids. If I'm thinking about, chores need to be done and we got to do this thing and I got to put that on the shopping list, blah, 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 blah. It's like my brain is full of life and I have no space to actually come to focus on the story. Do that, bring order to the multitude of thoughts that's happening in my head. So I know that if I am in a season of writing, I need to prioritize cutting down my mental load with the rest of my time. Making sure the chores are done. Making sure I'm... Can't shut off the kids. Yeah, maybe you're fine though. Yeah, can't shut off your kids. Definitely not. But I go away for a few hours. I'm like, I asked my husband to watch the kids, or I asked grandma to watch the kids, and I'm like, I need 3 hours to go and just get some writing done without interruptions. And you can prioritize that time too, where some parts of drafting, this is super easy for me. Like, whoa, the ideas are just flying onto the page. I don't need super focused time because I'm not trying to bring so many ideas into alignment, right? But then there are those times where it's like, I know I'm struggling through some thick material. I'm trying to really bring some ideas together and having to think through a lot of thoughts and ideas. I know when that happens, that's the time when I need to prioritize not being interrupted by my kids. But anyway, I don't know what your mental load is, but is there ways that you can make sure it's done or that you can let go of it while you're writing, because it is going to be an interruption and it's going to just clutter up your RAM, All right, moving on. Ooh. Did I have this set up myself? I wanted to watch a clip together. You'll have to let me know if the audio is coming through. This is Jordan Peterson, and I like Jordan Peterson, how he talks about story and art and all of those things. He's a psychologist. And the section that I'm going to talk about last, so we cover 3 of the 4 things with your kind of drafting, writing process, and that's motivation, your schedule, distractions. Now we're going to talk about your environment and your atmosphere. Okay, are you going to work for me, or are you just going to be annoying? You guys, can you hear this? I'm afraid of... Yeah, I'm afraid of that. It sounds like you can hear it, though. We might have to skip this video because I can't hear it. So I don't know which part of the video. Okay, you guys have to bear with me. I might have to. I'll just let it play for a couple minutes and hope it plays the section that I was gonna have you guys listen to. No audio. Cool. Well, never mind then. We'll just skip this part. Basically, what he's saying is if I remember correctly, rooms serve a function. Where you are serves a function, and it's to support you in what you are trying to do. In your bedroom, you have everything you need to sleep well. And if there's things in there that don't help you sleep well, you get rid of them, right? Yes, I'm doing it with OBS, Max. Wait, can you... I'm just going to skip over that, and we're going to figure out video clips for next time, because I think next time we'll probably have more video clips. But that there is value and purpose in ordering your environment in where you are going to be and where you are going to work so that it supports you in what you are doing. Now, that's difficult to do as young people. We often don't have very much control over our environment, be it we share a house or a room with other people, or in my case, it takes money to decorate and make a place your own, and it takes money to experiment, because you could do something and then hate it, and then you feel like it's a waste of money or whatever. So there is definitely I'll mess with the video later, Max. Value in knowing how to set up your atmosphere, set up the place that you work to actually support your work, to not be a distraction, but not just to not be a distraction, to actually help you in what you want to do, and what you want to accomplish. So some things to think about. Energy, which sounds a little woo-woo, but what is the rhythm and the atmosphere that you want in your space? For some people, extroverts like me, it's very helpful for me to go to a place where there's other people, like a coffee shop or a library or something. Sometimes that's the kick that I need. I want to feel the energy of other people also on their own endeavors and working, which is often what you will find in a library or a coffee shop, right? Or do you need absolute stillness? Is that what helps you focus? Again, make this your own. And sometimes you need some at one time and other things at a different time. And so know if you're feeling stuck, is it just you need to change your environment? You just need to go take a walk? I know people who, that's totally what they need. They just need to go do some push-ups, or they need to go for a run or a walk, or go do dancing for 10 minutes. And the energy of that gets your brain fired and gets you working, supports you in what you actually want to do. And so these are just some ideas on what to experiment with. There's also just the senses. What are you looking at when you're writing? What does your computer desktop look like? What does we're going to talk about all of them. What does your keyboard sound like? What music are you listening to? What does it smell like? I know that's a really funky one, but I definitely experimented with like having a specific candle that I would light whenever I sat down to write. And what happens is your brain starts to associate to that, right? So every time I lit the candle, my brain would go, "Oh, it's time to write. It's time to be creative," and it would kind of wake up and start firing away. And it was a kind of a smooth launch into my writing session. Touch. What does your keyboard feel like? What does your chair feel like? Are you being supported? Like, some of this seems like really little stuff that's dumb, and that was the point of playing the clip. It's like, this matters to support yourself and to put value and put money into what is actually going to make you happy to sit down and will make you enjoy the experience, what will support your creative process. So just some things to think about is where you are affecting what you're trying to do. So those are the 4 pieces of your writing process. Motivation, your schedule, your distractions. You can candle hack your brain. I know, I was like, that seems a little weird, but it totally worked. It totally made it was like the, oh, I think I skipped that one actually. Let me go back, guys. I can't. Pre-writing ritual. That's that idea of kind of having a smooth launch into your writing session. I know people who, when they plan out their writing session, they'll plan for like 10 minutes of yoga at the beginning of it. And like, I'm just going to go stretch my muscles, let my brain de-stress from everything that was happening before. So you're not trying to launch right in from something into the other thing. I don't really have a pre-writing ritual right now because I have little children. And so it's kind of like every spare moment I'm eking out. I'm like, I'm not going to take 10 minutes to go do yoga when I only have 40 minutes to write, right? So, but I know that that's my goal someday that I would like. And anything that I can do right now to kind of facilitate the transition into my writing, know what works for you. What do you need to do so that you don't just sit there for like 10 minutes? Like, what was I doing again? What was my ideas again? What was I? You know, you can, when you look at your process long term, you can start to build these pieces into it that are actually going to support you. So I don't have a ton of ideas on pre-writing rituals. It's something that I'm interested in. Makes sense. You can train your body to react to different stimulations with everything else. Yeah, why not writing? Right. Your brain, hack your brain. Make it work for you. Ha 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 ha. But bring order to your environment. Bring order to your schedule. Bring order to the way that you motivate yourself. And use it to support you and make sure it's not undercutting what you're trying to do. So, those 3 areas are just something to think about. Something to think about. Are you being conscious about this? Are you being honest about it? How could you change things up to actually support you? All right. So, we've covered your craft, getting more specific with your craft, how you go through it, what steps come first, how to get more and more specific and original with your thinking, right? And then this is your writing process when you actually sit down to write. How did you get there? What makes you actually sit down? What's going to distract you? And what makes you happy to be in the space that you have? Now I want to talk about kind of the third umbrella, third area, which I think I labeled your message. And like, honestly, when I first wrote this out, I labeled this, the reason you have writer's block is because you don't know what you're talking about. Which sounds really harsh, but I'm going to get into it. So I want you to look at this quote. This is from Story. Oh, that's really tiny on my screen. I don't know if I can read it. Let me try and... This is from the book Story by Robert McKee, which is probably one of the most referenced screenwriting books ever. Writers select a setting and launch a screenplay assuming a knowledge of their fictional world that they don't have. As they reach into their minds for material, they come up empty. So, where do they run? To films and TV, novels and plays with similar settings. From the works of other writers, they crib scenes we've seen before, paraphrase dialogue we've heard before, disguise characters we've met before, and pass them off as their own. Knowledge of and insight into the world of your story is fundamental to the achievement of originality and excellence. So, often, why we experience writer's block is because we do not yet understand what we are writing about. And so there's all these questions, right? You're sitting down to write and you're kind of like, this is a scene that needs to happen. What needs to happen in it? It's like, these two characters need to talk. What do they talk about? Well, they need to talk about what is important to the characters and what's important to your story. And it needs to take place in a place that makes sense for their characters. And it all can lead back to you don't know yet what exactly you're trying to talk about. And I'm sure you've experienced this before, that as you work through a story and work through a story and work through a story, you end up getting more and more and more and more and more and more specific about what... Sorry, I just saw your comment, Noah. You've only read that book 3 times. You got to have intimate knowledge of your story world and your characters and your message. What are you trying to say? What ideas are you trying to bring in alignment when you don't actually know, when it's still all subconscious? You can't put it in order. You can't bring it into the front of your brain enough to actually put it down on paper into words, right? And so you just kind of muddle around like, well, this is the scene and the characters. Oh, there's a random idea. I could type of that about, write about that. And then you get done with the scene and you're like, well, what next? Those characters kind of need to go over here. But what, it's like when you write that way, you kind of just end up wandering around in your brain until you happen upon the next idea. There isn't order brought to it. So the key to this type of writer's block is research. Research. And like I said, this research ideally should happen before you try and draft your story, or that's my stance as a plotter. And maybe that's just a plotter's stance. If you are more of a discovery writer, or, what do we call them, a pantser? You write by the seat of your pants. Maybe that's the opposite way from you. You try to draft out. It's when you're drafting the story that the questions come up that will lead to deeper research. If that's true, you need to know that about yourself and actually build your process around that is how you function. I'm a plotter, which means development is the important piece for me. I'm going to spend so much more time in development than I ever do in drafting and scripting. Because I am trying to gain this knowledge and insight into the world of my story, this intimate knowledge of the characters and the story. So, research is the key. And I'm going to talk about a few different forms of research here at the end when talking about writer's block in your message. So the definition of research is a diligent and systematic inquiry or investigation into a subject in order to discover or revise facts, theories, and applications, etc. Or it's to make an extensive investigation into. Okay? Research isn't just reading a couple books. Research is investigation, which is asking questions and looking for answers. Extensive investigation. So it's like one question will lead you down an avenue and you're like, oh, that's a question, and that's a question, and that's a question, and you keep going until you reach this point that Robert McKee is talking about of knowledge and insight, and you actually have something that you want to communicate and that you want to say. And what this process of investigation is doing is helping you bring order to those kind of intuitive first sparks and thoughts that you're having, right? So just like with everything else, research is unique to you. It's guided by your curiosity and your fascinations, your interest in this investigation. And so, like, embrace that idea of, I'm going to go deep into some of these things. I want to understand what I'm writing about, what I'm trying to communicate, what these characters are about, what they stand for, how they act. A deep knowledge and understanding. John, you're a pantser, and I personally find that developing the characters in the world they're in is a vital part of preparation. Yeah, after that you can release them into the world and record what happens. Yeah, exactly. You still have a development process, but it looks a little bit different because it's not so... as a plotter, I plot everything around the outcome. I know where the characters are going, and it's just about getting them there, right? And so I think the pantser... Ooh, that's lovely. Is a different priority in development. It's about, like, when you saw my list, it was the character arcs and the character tactics and who these characters are was at the bottom of the list. I think as a pantser, that's probably going to be at the top of the list. And understanding how that development process is going to support you in how you write and what is interesting to you and what brings you joy, right? Because we are here to have joy and fulfillment in our process. Okay, so research. I just want to kind of go through what I mean by research and some different thoughts on research. And again, these are specific to me because that's all I really have to work off of. This is more of just a launching off point of what does research mean for you? What sounds interesting about research for you? How do you gain a intimate and extensive insight and knowledge into your characters and into your world and into your themes and your message and what you are trying to communicate? All right. So these are the avenues of research that I have that are natural to me, and that's kind of I call myself an intellectual person, and I don't mean that I'm smart. I don't think I'm terribly smart, but I think first, feel second. That's what I mean. I kind of lead with my brain a little bit. So the research of facts is just information history, and I'm specifically interested in psychology and sociology. And so anytime that I'm like, okay, I'm going to create a world, I'm going to create a character, those are my avenues of research. I use the internet a lot. So I'm going to show you how this research kind of leads to that insight and intimate knowledge of your world and kind of leads you to the right question. So I'm going to read you something that I wrote because I knew I would not be able to think this up on the fly. So when researching facts, for instance, if I was going to write a story about a soccer team, which I have never participated in sports, I've never played soccer, so it's something that I know absolutely nothing about. I probably wouldn't ever write a story about it, but for example's sake, if I was going to write a story about a soccer team, I'd need to know a lot about facts about soccer, right? So things that I would research might be how many soccer players are there in my state or my country or just in the world in general? What training do you have to be a soccer player? What are all the pieces of a soccer player's uniform? How do soccer teams make money? What are the rules of playing soccer? How many games are in a season? What is the ultimate goal for a soccer team? What is the ultimate competition? Is it national? Is it international? That kind of thing. So you can just kind of run along that whole thing. I need to know about soccer, right? And then the next thing on here is history. So how did soccer get started? Who are the most famous players? How and when were the rules decided upon? How and when were different teams formed? And what are the latest advancements in gear or plays? How has it changed now or in the last couple years as compared to what it was 50 years ago or something like that? I just want to have a full understanding of this subject, right? And in psychology and sociology, what does the psychology of a typical athlete look like? How are soccer players trained mentally? How do athletes deal with stress or injuries? What draws people to soccer? How are soccer teams formed? What is the psychology of leadership? What are traits that make good players for the various positions? And what is the average economic status of a soccer player? And what are common psychological or sociological problems athletes encounter? Right? So it's like, when you embrace research and you're like, okay, we're going to go into this, and you kind of know your avenue of how you're going to approach it and get into it, you can just start with a whole boatload of questions. And can you see how researching to that depth and asking questions like that, you are going to move away from cliche and you're going to move into originality, because you aren't just copying other sports movies and other scenes. They had a scene in a locker room, and they had a scene at a party, and they had the scene where the two teams meet up and have a little bit of a face-off before the big game, right? Those are the cliches. Those are the tropes. You can actually move away from that and actually, okay, I want to have my own understanding. I want to be able to have my own ideas about this subject. You can do that with anything. So that's research of facts, to start to actually feed your brain with different avenues to come up with sparks, right? That's giving yourself different thoughts to work with, to put two different ideas together, and that's a time in a soccer's life that's really a struggle, so maybe that would work with this plot point. And it's like you can start to really build out your world and your characters, right? What are you trying to communicate? So the next thing on here is research of opinion. And research of opinion is really just, what do I think about this subject? And this is specific to me because I'm a theme-based writer. I always start with a theme. I always have. It's what... Megan says, I alter World War II history and past in my book. Wow, did I do and still have a lot of research to do. And I should have done it before I wrote the rough draft. Maybe you're part pantser. Yeah, I think maybe you are if you actually got through a whole draft. See, this is what I mean by I'm a plotter, is I would have gotten about 2 chapters in and then been like, I'd experienced writer's block, because I'm like, I have too many questions about the research here. I have too many questions about where these characters are going. And so I'm just sitting here thinking of all these questions instead of actually writing. That's what I do as a plotter anyway. I'm like, you got to do your research, man. Okay, so research of opinion. What do I think? What do I think about this theme, this question that I have? So I recently did the short film that I said was about revenge. And it kind of started with the question, what causes someone who has legitimately wants revenge and has a reason for revenge, what causes them to walk away from that? They have the opportunity right in front of them to take revenge. Why would they walk away? And so that was kind of my question. And so I wrote pages and pages of what I thought about revenge and what is the antidote to revenge and what revenge causes and where does it come from, right? That's what do I think. It's also what do other people think. I read up on the psychology of revenge, on different movies or pieces of art, stories that are about revenge, different characters who struggle with revenge. What have other people already said about this? Where do I agree with them? Where do I disagree with them? Yeah, how is this idea been portrayed in art and story? Where is kind of the gap that I haven't really seen filled? What is the message that I'm trying to convey? What is it that I'm trying to communicate? And I am like I said, I'm a theme-based writer, and so this is very, very concrete for me. And I think that a lot of filmmakers and writers are not theme-based like that. You guys start with pictures or an emotion or an experience that you want to have, and so you can apply these kind of ideas of research to that as well, of what is it exactly? What is it? that I want to capture? Is it a feeling? If it is a feeling, what feeling is it? And how has it been captured and portrayed before? And what are the pieces of it? And what are the different ways you could look at it? And what leads up to it? And what is the fallout of it? You know, it's like getting a real grasp on all of the pieces that all of the ideas that you're trying to bring in alignment, right? You have to know what the base of it is, and you have to understand the outworking of it in order to actually make a complete story out of it, because the story is where the characters come from, that they go through that experience, or the experience that they have the emotion or the realization of theme that you're trying to go through. And so you have to understand the sides of it, where you are before, where you are after, the implications of it. And that is not intuitive. I think that people think that, oh, I just feel it and so it comes out in my art. And I don't really think that. I think that a master can do that. They can just kind of think it and it just comes out in their art. And maybe I'm describing how I learn, and that's a question for you, is like, how does your intuition work, I guess, is the question. I know that mine works. I have to consciously think through everything. It's not just about, oh, I feel it, and so it will come out in my art. Megan says, you start with a cool idea or a fun or intriguing character, and then I go, how do I make this story worthwhile to read now? AKA theme. Yeah, or it's just, what do you want to say? What, you have something to say. You have things that you think. You have things that you believe. You have things that you've learned in your life, things that you've been through. And that is what is of value to other people in story, is to experience what you've experienced without actually experiencing it, right? That's what story is. You're going to experience, when you look at some of the more extreme things, it's like you're going to experience heartbreak, but you're not actually going to get your heart broken or have your relationships destroyed, right? You're going to experience extreme cold or starvation, but you're not actually physically going to experience it. You're just going to understand it. This is the value of story and art. And so I think as storytellers and artists, we have to understand what we are trying to communicate first, what our experience is, or whatever is driving your story at the moment, right? So, research of facts, research of opinion, because it's the research and the collection of the research into different ideas and different thoughts that will allow you to actually understand the root of it and in you, so that you can communicate it to other people, and it is of more value that way. So the last one on here is research of self. And I'm pulling a lot of this from Judith Weston's book. She's a director, and she wrote 2 books. One is called Directing Actors, and the other is called The Film Director's Intuition. And I think this stuff is from the Film Director's Intuition, about the research of self. So research of self just means, well, I'll read you what I have because I kind of have to build into it. So research of self can often look like you're not really doing much of anything. You're taking long walks, or doing dishes, or listening to music, or hanging upside down on the back of your couch, or reenacting scenes from your imagination in your backyard. But what is happening is this idea of active imagining, giving yourself time and space to really picture all of the aspects of what you're trying to write. And each time, you know what, I think I do have I think I skipped something here. I'm just going to throw this on here first. I forgot I was going to talk about active imagining. So this is a quote, yes, from the Film Director's Intuition. It says, active imagining is different from idle fantasy. An elementary illustration of the difference might be found when looking through a fashion catalog. I see a beautiful dress on a model and imagine myself looking like the model. That's an idle fantasy. It's different from imagining myself in the dress, which is more work. I mean, literally, it takes more time and effort to imagine the dress on me than to succumb to the instantly gratifying fantasy of imagining that in this dress I will look like the model. Right? And this is a little bit like what I was talking about with motivation and having realistic vision. actually do the work of imagining what reality will be like. And so this active imagining is something that you really have to learn to do as a writer, because I know for me, when I have a spark, it's like I feel like I can see the whole story. Like Noah said, I see the beginning, I see the end, the characters start here and they land there, right? It feels like I have a full understanding. But in reality, I have to actively work through and imagine every piece of the story or every piece of the characters. I have to do the active imagining work. And this is kind of what I'm calling the research of self. So back to that. Sorry, I'm a little out of order for you guys. I hope you can track with this. So with research of self, what is happening is this idea of active imagining, giving yourself time and space to really picture all the aspects of what you're trying to write. And each time you revisit your imagination, you add a little bit more to the edges of your ideas. You make a few more connections, and this creates those lightning bolts of inspiration that you're looking for. However, explained in that quote, you have to be purposeful with this time, lest you fall into just idly fantasizing about things. So active imagining produces results, more ideas, more avenues of emotions, and more thoughts to explore. It's actual work for your brain, and sometimes it takes work to get your brain to focus on that and not get sidetracked, right? So to help maintain that focus, it can be helpful to break down some different avenues of self-research. So that's what's on the screen here. We have memories. What are the memories that are connected to what you're writing? How did those memories impact you? How did they shape the way you view the world? Relive those memories through the lens of active imagining and try to remember physically what it felt like. How do those memories motivate you? And you can find so much good earth to play in when it comes to characters and conflict and emotions when you really dig into your own experiences. And I've found that this active imagining thing is so true. We can feel like we're imagining. We can feel like we're so creative and imagining. We can see all these stories and all these characters, but unless you're actually setting aside the time to do the work, to actually do the investigation into where this idea is coming from, the things that matter to it, why does it matter to you, what is sparking it in your memories, what emotional connections can you find in your memories, all of that, all of those questions, when you dive into them, when you investigate them, actually bring forward so much good earth. Like, how can you have writer's block when you're doing this? There's so much richness to work with when you're really engaged with actively imagining and honestly questioning and investigating all the pieces of what you're trying to do. So, memories, imagination, the realm of wouldn't it be cool if, images, colors, emotions, characters. This feels kind of obvious, like duh, we're writers, we imagine stuff, we imagine stories. But like I'm saying, you have to do the active imagining, setting aside the time and space to explore your imagination. For me, this is right. I have to do this while writing. If I just like sit down and like think, my mental load interrupts. Different ideas for different stories interrupts. I need some focus on, I do kind of like stream of consciousness writing, like this is a question and that might be the answer, which leads to another, like I literally am writing down my thoughts so that I can bring them into the conscious space in the front of my brain instead of the subconscious space that spark came from. And once, this is kind of like brain dumping, right? Once you get it out of your head onto paper, there's more space to have more ideas, and you can actually get past unoriginal ideas and really get to the meat of what this story is. What am I trying to do? What am I trying to communicate? What is the value here for me? And that will be the value for other people. All right, the last one on here is empathy, which, when talking about empathy, for me, this is more connected to coming up with characters and understanding your characters, having that intimate knowledge of your characters and building realistic characters. Using active imagining to really put yourself into someone else's shoes. That's what empathy really is. And it's not just, I wonder what I would do in that situation, but imagining living the life that the character has lived and the internal dialogue that they would have running in their head, or taking someone that you know that is like your character and trying to understand their motives and desires. When you do this, when you actively imagine your characters in all of their facets and make them a real person, you'll never be out of ideas. Like, how could you run out of ideas? There's character conflict, character growth, there's conflict, because when you're writing compelling conflict as a storyteller, everyone is right, and so you have to be able to step into the shoes fully of all of your characters and understand how they're coming at the conflict from their point of view. And you have to be able to empathize with them in how they feel they're right around the conflict. So this is for building characters, and it goes so much more deeper than just like, this is your character's personality, or these are the ways that they are in conflict with the characters around them or the characters of the world. This is like, how are they in conflict with themselves? What are the memories in the past that's driving them? Like, this is all fun stuff for us as writers, right? If you can make your characters real to you, you're going to be excited to tell their stories, right? You're not going to get stuck. You're not going to get unmotivated, because you have such a wealth of things that you have to say and things that you're trying to communicate, and you have so many questions. Like, when you engage with the process of investigation in order to have that intimate knowledge and insight into your world that Robert McKee was talking about, it's like, any time that you feel stuck with writer's block, it's like, just disengage with writing and engage with your characters, engage with what it means to you, what you were trying to communicate, what was the original thought here? Did you go astray from it, What is still exciting you about this process, this project? So, I think that's kind of the end of my research rant. There was 3 types of research there. It was, for me, facts, research of opinion, and then the self-research. And that's kind of the end of what I had to share with you guys. Is learn your craft, learn how you craft a story, your unique way to craft a story. What works for you, what supports you. Learn what you actually need when you're writing in your process. What is your process of sitting down in front of the computer, getting words out look like? And then learn your message. What are you trying to say? And do you know what you're talking about? And I don't mean that in a, are you an expert in this? I mean, do you have intimate knowledge and understanding? Do you actually, is it conscious? Have you actually thought through this, as opposed to, I just feel something and it feels this way, and so it will be my art. Like, I think that there are people who can operate that way, and they need less of a research process maybe than I feel that I do, and like I've kind of shown here. Heavy plotter. But if you're feeling stuck and your intuition is failing you, this is the route to go. You need to be able to ask deep questions of yourself. Where did this come from? What do I think about it? What's interesting about it? What are the facets of it? All of that sort of stuff. All right, I am curious to know, has any of this sparked some thoughts for you guys? Not necessarily anything that I said, but like, have you guys gotten any thoughts on things that you need in your process in any of these areas? What sounded interesting to you? What gaps have you been having in your process that you're having ideas about how to fill? I'm curious to know. Whew. I was talking for a while. This lag is annoying. But I know that when I embraced my process and really, I think I had this idea that it's too artsy to kind of focus on these things. Like, it sounds kind of like, oh, dig into yourself, like research of self and lighting a candle to help you. It's like some of the stuff feels so stupid and dumb, or that's the idea that I have. It's so little. It's so, what does this have to do? But when I started implementing these things and actually just like giving myself to focus on my process and what I needed, that's when I stopped having writer's block. I'm always excited to write. I'm always excited about the next piece of the story, right? Getting warm. I'm getting warm. I normally have like the AC on while I'm in this room, but it's too noisy, so we're working against the heat here. Trying to think if there's anything else that I wanted to. As a character for focused writer, it may help me to think about every character as the main character as they are in their own minds. Yeah. This definitely, when they're like that, you know, you're in a scene and you have your protagonist that's interacting with 3 or 4 characters, or just one character, their antagonist. It's like, when they're all real characters, they're all interesting to investigate, and so you don't run into writer's block, because it's not like there's nothing there to work with. You're like, well, I could ask that character some questions about what do they believe about this, or I know they have opinions because they have a background and they have deeply held beliefs, and they believe that they are right about what they are doing, and they have convictions, and so they're interesting, right? For me, I think probably some of the most helpful pieces were the motivation pieces of letting myself have little goals and not looking at the whole project as this massive thing that I'm trying to accomplish. It's just this goal, this little one that's in front of you. Do that. That's all you need to really focus on for right now. So that I actually get my butt in the chair and write. And also learning how to think deeply about what I'm trying to communicate is giving me a lot of room to spend time in the development process to understand myself and like, see, this is what I mean by it sounds so artsy. I want to understand myself. It's like, before I put it into practice, I didn't understand what that meant. And so having me say that, I don't know if that like helps. Almost every time I've had writer's block, it's because I lost track of my focus for the scenes and how the scenes worked with the plot or didn't work. Yeah, and I would agree, but I lose track because it's not thought through enough. Like, if it's all connected, if it's all one thought line happening, I don't lose track. And so it always leads, for me, it always leads back to development and understanding what I'm trying to communicate. So, in thinking about AI, this is where I think that AI can really help you with writer's block, actually. It's in this kind of research of self and investigation of opinion sort of stuff where, because you can ask the AI, give me 20 reasons someone might betray someone. And then you can look at those and go, well, that sparked an idea. That's interesting. Okay, give me 20 ways that you would, it's like you can do this research with the AI where you're not having to do the work of putting words to what you're feeling. The AI can help you draft, right? It can help you draft your characters' backstories. That's definitely something that I've seen is like, write 3 different backstories for a character seeking revenge. Write 3 different backstories for a character who's stuck in a fight they don't want to have. It's like the AI will help you get the ideas out of you faster so you can move on to originality and you can combine the ideas in creative ways. Oh, hi, Larissa. If you're bored or at a loss for the next scene, would it stand to reason that what I'm bored of needs to go, or maybe there's something to simplify in order to move on and plot better? I think you have to ask why you're bored. Are you bored with the character? Are you bored with the scene? There's no conflict in the scene. If you're bored with the character, that's like a stop writing, go back and like do this investigation of the character. How do they see themselves right in the conflict? And if there's no conflict to be right over, then you have an even bigger problem, right? So if you're bored, that's definitely a sign that something's off, and the question is what? And I think you just got to give yourself the space to figure it out and not try and push through. See, most advice for writer's block is, just sit down and write anyway. And I'm like, no, know what you're trying to write about. Have you done enough to bring enough order to your thoughts to know what you're trying to write about and how you're trying to structure it and how you're trying to communicate it through the characters and why it means something to the characters and, where the ins and outs of how it's going to lead them and how they conflict with the other characters. It's like, if you haven't done the groundwork or for pantsers, if the order is to write and then answer these questions as you're writing, just give yourself the space to ask the questions and actually investigate and delve deep into them. Sorry, I'm going to try and speak in the camera. I know it's probably annoying to have me I don't agree with okay, so that advice applies if you're procrastinating and you're procrastinating and you're just not willing to sit down and work through the hard things. Then that advice applies, right? Just sit down and write. Just keep writing. Just work through it. Write it. That applies only in that circumstance. If you have to understand your craft, your process, and your message. I think so. In order to troubleshoot it. Because it's all fine and dandy when you're working out of your intuition and everything is flowing and the ideas and the words are just woohoo, woo! But what are you going to do when it's not? And that's what writer's block is. It's your intuition has failed you. And so you can't work out of it anymore. You need to bring things to your conscious mind and work through them consciously. That's what I think. And as a plotter, that's to the extreme for me, I guess. It's like I have to do that from the very beginning. It all needs to be conscious. I need to understand what I'm talking about. And understand that it doesn't all go into your story, too. I go down a lot of avenues of research and thought and different things, different plot points and whatever that never makes it into the actual story. And sometimes my theme doesn't even... I want it to be subconscious in my story. I'm not trying to overtly present a theme, but I understand it overtly. I understand what I'm trying to do. And so I don't get lost because I always have the goal in front of me. Really encouraged to make a special note of why you were writing what you're writing, why the characters you chose, why the plot. That might help with becoming less bored. Yeah. I'm a big fan of it coming from inside of you. I think that's probably one of the harder things of being a writer, like a gig writer, or writing for clients, is that these projects are not coming from inside you. And so you have to find a way to connect to it and make it from you. And that's, you can't get away from that. And clients and people who aren't necessarily artists or creatives will kind of think it's kind of like a machine where you just beep, boop, beep, boop, put in the parameters and out pops the product, and it's when you're the machine that you're supposed to put the parameters in and then out pops the product. That doesn't really work. You have to understand how your machine works. And so you got to find the connection that makes it yours, because otherwise that's why they hired you, right? Because they wanted your artistry, your creativity, and so make it yours. That's what I've found anyway. Do you guys feel like this is helpful? I had a lot of fun talking about all of this stuff that I've learned, so whether or not it was helpful for you, I had a great time. But I would like to know if this has been helpful. It's given you some new thoughts or encouraged you. I think that we need to be encouraged to be artistic in the correct way. That's what I've found that I needed to encourage myself in, is okay, it sounds artsy, it sounds like, oh, I'm a creative, I gotta have my creative process. It sounds that way to me, and I've never felt comfortable leaning into it, and so this is the product of my process of leaning into it. And I think maybe that dislike towards that comes from people who act like they're all artistic, but I'm not trying to be judgy, but they're still in the baby steps of their art. And so it feels weird, for them to be like, oh, I have this process and I need my environment and this is just the way that I roll, when they're still kind of in their baby steps and they're still learning, and it doesn't feel like that's justified. But maybe, I'm not saying that's right of me to think that way. I'm breaking through some of that. No, let's say you spent forever plotting out a whole short film script and did all the research, but then after you wrote it, it just isn't the same as you imagined it while plotting it out. Does that go back to development? I would say that's working out of your intuition. And so you had a spark and you knew how to apply development to it, but those things weren't necessarily connected. You know what I mean? There was a disconnect somewhere where it's like knowing that baking is putting a bunch of ingredients together and putting it in the oven. And so you had an idea that you were going to bake a cake. And so you did the thing. You put all ingredients together and you threw it in the oven, and out came a pie. The problem was the ingredients weren't correct, right? The process looks the same. The ingredients are different. And so I think that goes back to knowing what you're trying to communicate and doing research into that. What are you trying to say? Where did that spark come from that you saw in your head? What are the pieces of it? That sounds like some more investigation into what your purpose is in that project, because it sounds like you got a little off course of what your purpose was in the project. Oh, thanks, Larissa. The memory bit in particular gave me a few revelations about things that I'd lost in my process. So it's very helpful. Oh, I'm glad, John. Let me know what you think, Noah. I your ideas do evolve and shift and change as you work through your process. And so you it's again knowing yourself. Is it that you're inflexible, or is it that it didn't? With inflexibility, sometimes it's a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing. So is this a situation where it's a bad thing, or is this a situation where it's a good thing, where you're holding true to your original vision and your original idea because it means something to you? Why does it mean something to you? Where did it come from? Like that, those are some questions you can ask about it. Or is the inflexibility hampering you in this aspect? Well, it doesn't match up with what I wanted. Can you just let go of what you wanted? And yes or no? It's about knowing yourself. Right? And I also wouldn't, I don't think you should look at that and feel like a failure because you wrote a whole dang script. Or you plotted, you wrote a whole dang script and you got that experience under your belt of working through it, getting the dialogue on the page, figuring out how to motivate yourself. And even if it was easy for you, you didn't have to work real hard on it. You still got through that experience. You've still built trust with yourself that you can do it. So it's not wasteful what you've done in any measure. There's a lesson here that you're kind of wanting to take away from it. And this is what I mean by kind of that reflect part of the let's see if I can bring it up. The reflect part of this little creative process. Look back on what you've done. You celebrate your wins, you celebrate your goals, and then you kind of go, what could I have done better? Like, what is the lesson that I should take away? And often in the examination of that lesson, you kind of find your next steps forward. A spark, which you then develop and you create a product with it and you perfect your product. And then you reflect back on that whole thing and you're like, well, that was a great experience. I learned some things. I achieved some things. And that just happens over and over again. Ooh. Suppose we can get rid of my talking points since we're just chatting now. I think writer's block, it's you don't know what questions to ask to bring forward the ideas into your conscious mind so that you can order them. That's what I think it is. And so the answer is questions, and knowing what questions to ask and what the process of questioning is. And as you do that more and more, you can see some patterns and you can create some shortcuts inside your patterns because you see that they're patterns and you're just bringing more order, right? Was that helpful, Noah? Am I on the mark or I'm totally off? It's hard to say without actually looking at your project. Yeah, how does it not match what you imagine? Sometimes you're surprised by things, but it doesn't always make them bad, right? You have to have flexibility, and there's discovery and story and creativity. But you also need to know when you're getting off course. And I'm a big fan of knowing your purpose. You have this one script that's taking forever to get right on. Do you know what the problem is? Do you know what the problem area is and why it's not working? Oh, I'm glad it's helpful, Noah. Yeah, sometimes we're surprised with things that doesn't always make them bad. No, and when you're surprised by something, it's your intuition, right? It's boop, there popped an idea out, and you're like, where did that come from? It comes from your subconscious working with all the different background ideas and inputs and things that you're trying to put together, and then it boop comes into conscious, and you're like, where did that come from, right? It still came from you. It's not like it's not hijacking what you're trying to do necessarily, you know. Larissa, a lot of it's because you pantsed it a long time ago and you're still figuring out the characters and their conflict cores. Right. Have you read The Anatomy of Story? It's going to be my new favorite recommendation for writers. It has changed the game for me on character development and character conflicts, for sure. I think that's, you know, once you understand that it's a process, then you can chunk it up into little pieces, and you can research those little pieces. Like, I don't know if you guys experienced this, but if you ever looked up how to learn to write, or, you know, how to get over writer's block, there's like 80 suggestions and you don't really know where to turn. But when you can get specific about your questions, you can get specific about your research, right? It's a great point. Just because something doesn't fit as you first imagined, it doesn't mean you can't work off of it to make it better than when you first imagined. Yeah, you'll need to look that up. Yeah, Anatomy of Story by John Truby. It's going to be a handbook for me for a while. I'm probably going to reread that every single time I start a new feature film, because there's so much in it that I probably didn't glean the first time. But it's absolutely great at understanding story. What is it that you said? Megan said this the other day. She's like, it teaches you how to be a chef instead of a cook. Cooking, how to, yeah. I probably butchered that. Yeah, it doesn't mean you can't work off of it to make it better than you first imagined. No, there's a balance, and this is why I say it's about knowing yourself. Because the balance for each of us is different. What is the balance between, you know, being open to new ideas and things that come up and surprises, and sticking true to your vision and to your purpose and to your goals, right? It's a good book, very thick but helpful. Chef instead of a cook, yeah. Also, just taking things out is so good, because you get down to bare bones and then you can see what really should be added back in. Yeah, that's definitely true. That's some advice that I got, that I'm applying to scripting now, but I got it in the edit when we were editing our feature film. It was too long, right? But I looked at it and I was like, well, I don't know what to cut out. And so the advice that I got was just cut out everything. Like, just try it. Cut out way too much and see what's missing, and then add it back in, and then add something else back in, and then maybe take it out, and like experiment with cutting in and out to see what actually is vital to your story. I've not done that in scripting. I'm still in the bringing all of my pieces together portion of development for the script that I'm working on. So I haven't gotten to remove. Maybe I've gotten better at seeing redundancies, because there have been things where it's like in drafting an outline, I come up, you know, with like 6 plot points, and then I see that 3 of them are redundancies. I'm like, oh, well, that just needs to be 1 plot point. You know, I think getting all the way through editing my feature film definitely has made me better at seeing redundancy way earlier in the process. That phrase is actually from Brandon Sanderson. Woo woo! He has a free Fantastic Story and Plotting Lessons on YouTube. I love Brandon Sanderson. A genius in some ways, and struggles in other ways, but a genius nonetheless. I mean, writers are actors, cinematographers, directors, editors, all in your head on the page. Yep. Yup. It's actually going through the process of all the way writing a whole film, directing a whole film, editing the whole film has made me understand the distinctions way better between writers and actors and directors, like what the function of each of them is and where the lines cross, you know? I feel like that's definitely made me a better writer because I'm not trying to do so much directing and acting in my writing. I'm like, I'll leave that for later, okay? Did anybody else have any questions about writer's block or specific situations? This is lots of fun. Thanks for engaging with me. But no issue with budget if you want to change the fight on a lava bridge instead of a water bridge. Sorry. Ugh. Sorry, guys. Well, I guess that's something that we didn't touch on. John was talking about being a producer suffering writer's block because of all the budget constraints. I have always approached that from I would say working my budget into my Spark process. But it's like, Sparks, I know they come from your intuition, so you don't have a lot of control over them. But building it into kind of my goals for the project in the first place. It's like, I want to be able to shoot this in 2 days, or with 3 actors, no more, or, you know, we have this one location, but we don't really have any other location. So it's going to be centered around this location. And maybe this is more in the development process than the Spark process. So as I think about it, it's like, when you know that's happening, you can orient yourself around the goal. And so I think that approaching it as just trying to come up with ideas and then like negating the ones that don't fit your goal is kind of the opposite way that of how you should come at it, or at least how I think of to come at it. It's like a negative, trying to outline negative space, maybe, is how I would think about it. Instead, draw a box. It's like, okay, this location, that's going to be our center location for the center, like, climactic scene, because it's the one awesome location that we get. What's the story? What are the characters? What are they doing around it? You know, it's like, it's build the other way than saying, well, that's an idea, but we can't do that. And that's an idea, but we can't do that. It's like trying to, like, poke and, like, where's the box that we're going to work in, instead of just, like, drawing a box. I'm working inside of it. I don't know if that's helpful. That's how I think about it. If you guys haven't, then I did make a video about, what's it called? I think it's called, like, How to Brainstorm, or it's about brainstorming, where I kind of covered this like the transition between sparks and development of how do you come up with ideas based off your spark. Where do you go to look for inspiration, and how do you kind of kickstart that spark process so that you're not just working out of nothing? I can't remember what the name of that video is. Quick question, and this is really a spec script versus shooting script issue. Putting higher budget elements in to have as ideal, but with the understanding or flexibility in the story that it could be done cheaper. I mean, I think that's a wise thing to do. Because you're producing and directing your own stuff, right, Larissa? I think that if you're just a screenwriter, definitely you can do that. Like, just throw things in and be kind of like, this is the story function. And I think when you do that, you have to understand the story function of your thing. So if it is trying to come up with an example, okay, we're going to shoot in a mansion. Why can't you just shoot in a house? Well, there's some connections with the characters having to do with the mansion. Like, you have to actually understand the story function so that you can think of proper substitutes. And it would be a convo with the producer, but yeah, on the script when they see it. I think that you have to know where you are in your learning process, and when you're young and you're just starting out, maybe that's not a great thing to do because you really don't understand budgeting yet. I think that a lot of young writers, it's very, very good for them that they're so imaginative, but they don't really understand the limits of what can be done on some budgets. And so once you actually understand the budget limitations in what you're writing, then I think you can totally do what you're talking about, Larissa. Like, throw some dreams in there, some wish list items. You never know what can happen. And if you are working with a producer, like, this is what producers do. This is what they're good at, is like fulfilling those kind of dreams and being like, yeah, I know a guy who knows a guy who has a thing who can work for that, you know? And that's what a good producer can do. And so it doesn't hurt to dream a little bit once you understand what is actually in the realm of reality, you know? Like, you ride in a Rolls Royce, but it doesn't have to be a Rolls Royce. The one thing that I would say, as someone who has talked about producing a lot, I'm not a producer, but I've learned a lot about producing simply because you have to, as a director, you have to understand what your producers are doing. Producers look at the final product and where the money is going. And so when you're putting things like that in your script, is it vital to the story? That's what they're going to look at. Is this vital to the story? Is this adding enough value to the audience that we should invest the money and the time? Because I think a good producer, if it's not valuable to the story, even if they could get it, I don't think they should, right? Because they should put that money into caring for their cast and crew, or making things easier, or having a second bathroom, or, you know, it's like they always have a longer list of things that they could put into it, having better meals, right? And so it's always going to be a balance of, well, where does the money go? Does it go on camera or off camera? And so when you're scripting, you can keep that in mind. If the big things you're asking for add a lot of value to the end product and to the story, shoot for the moon. See what your producers can do. But if it's just like, oh, this will be kind of fun because, you know, then it's a little bit like, I'm pretty sure the producer's going to cut that. Like, a good producer will cut that. That's what I think. Yeah. This is how producers are creative, you know. It's in being creative where the money goes and how far it can stretch and what it'll give you. And so if you can make a case for it in the story, yeah. This lag annoys me to no end. I'm just like sitting here in silence waiting for you guys to actually hear what I said like 10 seconds ago. I guess, I did have another thought with writer's block. There have been times recently, so I'm not saying this is something that used to happen. This is something that still happens, where I'll sit down in development and I'll be like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what questions to ask. And to me, that's always a sign that I'm a little bit bored with the avenue that I'm down right now, and to just give it a little break and work on something else that sounds fun and exciting. So, you know, if I'm trying to work out all the plot points and I'm just like, what? You know, I'm like, okay, then today, this time that I've set aside, I'm just going to fill out some character web stuff, or just some character tactic stuff, whatever, questionnaire, or, you know, it's like, I can still be productive with that time because I understand all the pieces of development. I understand the process. I can move around in the process as I need to. You can't do that if you don't understand the process. Is kind of the point there. But there are times where I'm just kind of bored with where I'm at in one piece of the process at a time, and I'll move over to another one. That's definitely something that happens. And a lot of times, if I'm honest, I can trace that to lack of sleep or blood sugar levels. Really what just needed to happen, I needed to eat. And then, wow, I'm super creative after my blood sugar rises. You know. Putting writing projects on the back burner is sometimes the best thing you can do. Well, I don't put the project on the back burner. I just put that little piece of the project. I understand putting the project on the back burner too. I've done that too. Right now I have about 4 projects that I'm juggling right now, and so it is kind of like, yeah, this week I'm kind of burnt out on that one, so I'm gonna switch over to another one for a little while. Yeah, 3 writing projects open. Write a sentence, go to another, do bigger. I don't recommend that level of jumping around in your projects. That would drive me nuts. That would drive me nuts. I jump around like per day or per week. Oh, I'm glad. No, I'm glad. That it was helpful. Do you guys have any votes on what we should talk about next time? I'm going to do another one of these next month. I'd probably do them every 2 weeks if I can, but as I said, I'm working on like 4 projects right now, so forget to eat. Yeah. Don't forget to eat, like blood sugar. It's important. Your brain functions a certain way. It needs its sugar, okay? I think some options on the poll were like feeling stuck as an intermediate writer. Like what is that? What is an intermediate writer, and why do you feel stuck there, and what's that process look like? I have some thoughts on that. Another one that I want to talk about is AI, like just kind of explore AI and what's the what with this, since it's such a hot topic right now. I don't know if anybody's watching the Writers Guild strike. I'm not watching it too closely, but definitely know that that's happening. And I'm sorry for the box office and the streaming services for the next couple of years. It's gonna suck. Hey, more opportunity for us independent writers. Let's see, there was another one. What was the other one? Maybe you need a vacation. Yeah, or just I'm learning to have a little bit, to operate in a little bit more faith, and faith in the Lord, but also just faith that what's inside of me to say was put there. You know, who I am is unique, and it was put there by Him. It was how He created me. And so having a little bit of faith to lean into that, and you know, He can work miracles with the money. And so if you're feeling passionate about a project, but you're like, I have no idea how to make that happen, you know, that's not necessarily hang on, did my stream die? Or feeling passionate about a project, but you're like, I have no idea how to make that happen, you know, that's not necessarily okay, hang on, guys. Sorry. I had to wait for my... Hang on a sec. What happened? Okay. Troubleshooting. Troubleshooting. Okay. Well, I think you guys can still hear me, possibly. So I'll just keep talking. While I try and troubleshoot. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, just having, I have faith in the Lord that maybe the money will come, and He's put this project on your heart, and He has a way for it to happen, There's a lot of peace to be found in faith about that kind of thing, and that can be an area where He's wanting to draw you closer to Him and closer in your walk of faith. And sorry guys, what is happening? I don't know what's happening. Let's see if it'll... Oh, there it is. All right. We're back up and rolling. Sorry, guys. Some technical difficulties. Money is nothing to God. Money is nothing to God. He can make it happen. He's worked miracles for us in the money department and making things happen, and it's very cool to watch. And so, if that sounds like where you're supposed to kind of head, you can lean into that faith, and that will give you peace to set the money worries aside for a little while and focus on your art if that's where you're supposed to be at right now. There's different things. You gotta be you gotta be listening to the Lord in order to know where you're at, right? TV show writing versus indie feature styles, audio dramas. I don't know anything about audio dramas, so yes, you can hear. Okay, good. I do not know anything about audio dramas. That'd be interesting to talk to you about, Larissa. TV show writing versus indie feature styles. I have done the most cursory of research into TV show writing because I was this feature that we're working on. We toyed around with the idea of making it a limited series instead of a feature. And so I was like, well, what does that mean? And so I did a little bit of research, just enough to kind of know, I don't think that's the direction for us right now. Kendrick Brothers has some amazing stories, yes, about how God provided financially, and He always supplies money that we need. Yes, it is true. It is true. He did it for us when we were financing our feature. We didn't even have to start. We were like, okay, how do we do this investor thing? How do you find people? And it was like, we didn't even have to barely ask. People came to us. We just started talking about that we were working on this project. People came to us and were like, can we finance this? Okay? None of it was us. It was all the Lord bringing the money together. So Larissa, TV show writing, I have a couple of thoughts, but I don't know how useful that would be. Because I don't really have any experience with it yet. I want to write a limited series. I also know that writing an actual show is not for me. Limited series probably be it. I don't like the idea of being in one world and one project for years. I say that as it's been 4 years working on one project. It was 3 years working on Matchmade. It's already been 1.5 years working on this feature. But you know what I mean. I don't want to be... That doesn't appeal to me is all that I mean. To be working on a TV show. The Lord is your manager. He will bring the things. Yes, He will bring the things. I don't know if you just hit enter before you're ready. What about talking about heroes and villains writing? Oh my goodness. I have a rant forming on heroes and villains. I do. I don't know if it's all the way yet formed enough. But I could talk about that since it's... You've done a little bit of show writing, co-writing, but yeah, need to practice and learn more. It's a different ball of wax. That's what I saw when I was researching. I was like, well, this is a very different way of thinking about story. Johnston, you're currently driving to Oregon, so you can't join in. It's nice listening to this on the drive. And you're definitely giving me some things to think about. Oh, I'm glad. I hope you have a safe trip, Johnston. I'm glad that you could tune in. I need to start a podcast. I've started 2 different podcasts at different times and failed to continue with them. Mostly just because I don't have a ton of time or desire to be editing podcasts and like do all the socials. And it's like, if I could just sit down and talk, dude, I'd sit down and talk. But like, actually do the producing of the podcast is not my jam. So it's definitely on the like, I've got that in my sights eventually when I can turn my attention enough to make money, this homegrown filmmaker thing. Right now I'm focusing on like Abundant House making money, our features making money, that sort of thing. I do want to eventually bring some financial support to homegrown filmmakers so that I can do it more regularly and do a podcast and just bring quality content, because I especially in the Christian world, I don't think there's enough training content on specifically story and writing. Yeah, I just have it unedited, and it's like, it sounds so simple. It sounds so simple. You just gotta kind of download it and turn it in an audio file and stick it on the podcast sites, right? It is simple. It's just, it's one more thing that doesn't make it onto my to-do list, you know? You just listened to one of my podcasts while driving the other day. But it's cool with these writer live talks are better because it's nice and interact with everyone. Yes, I'll gain your wisdom. Oh, I don't know if I have wisdom. I have a little bit of experience. But I'm glad. I'm happy. The way that I grew up learning, talking about what you've learned is part of learning. It's like the last step of learning is being able to express it and communicate it to other people. And so this is as much value for me as it is for anyone who gets to hear it or listen to it, because it forces me to put my thoughts in order and write them down and actually think about what I think and to know what I'm talking about. Anywho, I'm probably going to sign off here pretty soon. Let you guys go. But yeah, maybe I'll turn this into a podcast, Larissa. I'll think about it. Just as soon as I can pay someone. I know you can pay someone to take your videos and turn them into podcasts. Like, it's probably not even that expensive. It's the next step. It'll be the next step. I'm just doing one step. I'm showing up. Yeah, because, I'm doing it because I think there's not enough Christian writing resource out there. It's bugged me. It really, really bugged me to go to CWVFF and hear them say, we would love to bring more writing seminars and more writing advice to you guys and kind of like a keystone writing thing, but we just don't have that person. And I was like, why not? Where are the writers in the Christian film world? And because we all know that the writing in the Christian film world sucks, why does it suck? And it's led to this kind of bigger question for me. And I've had a lot of different components to that question. Okay, let's do an audio drama and cast all our friends. I've definitely had that thought as a little 11-year-old listening to Focus on the Family. Ugh, teach. Yes. I know you felt it too, probably. It's just... So, I am not by any means a writing expert. I have a passion for writing. I have a passion for being a Christian writer. So I'm just going to talk about that as I can. That's my plan. Alright, I think I do need to let you guys go, though. And I need to get out of this hot, stuffy room. Why does Christian writing suck? And then I'll get back on my soapbox, though. There's a rant forming. I'm pretty sure I'll have a whole video on why Christian writing sucks in about 6 months. Like, I gotta do some research and some development. I have a spark. I need to do some development and some drafting and refining. And then I'm not kidding. But, I have a lot of thoughts on why Christian writing sucks. I'm always interested to hear other Christian writers' takes on it, though. Add a few more questions to my investigation of this. So, if you guys have thoughts, feel free to share. Might have to do with how they treat themes and maybe characters. I agree. It actually ties into heroes and villains a little bit for me. There are a lot of opinions. It's like everyone can have their opinions. I want answers. I want solutions. So I think that's more closely what I'm trying to divine. Is not just like my opinion, but like what is the actual solution there. Oh, my camera shut off again. Alright, guys. I'm going to have to go. I think my camera is overheating. That's why it's causing that. Alrighty. Thank you guys for hanging out with me. I had a lot of fun. I hope this provided some good value, some good thought-provoking questions for you. Feel free to email me at homegrownfilmmaker@gmail.com, or we have a Facebook group where we talk about movie stuff and answer questions and all that sort of thing. It's the Homegrown Filmmakers on Facebook. There's a link for it somewhere. Oh, you're welcome, Larissa. I've been doing early morning live streams for 3 days a week, and so I will be back on Friday. I've kind of been in and out the last couple weeks because I've been sick, but I am better now, so I will be there at 5 a.m. Friday morning, working on my thing for an hour and a half. If you'd like to join me, you are welcome to. Bring your own project, and we will commit to making some progress. If you're not there this Friday, I would do it every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday morning at 5 a.m. my time, so Pacific Standard Time. I think that's about it. So I will see you guys later. Thanks for hanging out. Bye.